Let's start. So thanks everyone for tuning in for this webinar, which is called Rising in Resilience. My name is Gianluca Riglietti and I'm from PANTA, and today I'm joined by Gert Kogenhop. I hope I pronounced your name right, Gert. And if not, please feel free to correct me. Who's director at BCM Plus. And Gert is based in the Netherlands and he's here today to have a conversation with us, basically, on the report that we've recently published, which is called Rising in Resilience, and it's basically an analysis of how young professionals are doing in the business continuity and resilience profession. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about the report that we've published, and then I'll ask Gert to provide his feedback. Now, Gert is also has participated to international standards committees on business continuity and resilience. So after a brief discussion about the report, we'll be talking about how to involve young professionals in the business continuity and resilience industry inside the basically in the feedback process to international standards, or even just to make them more familiar with the process so that they can sort of like ask to be involved if they want to. So just a quick brief introduction about PANTA. We are a consultancy based in Milan. We were founded in 2009 by Gianluca, and we specialize in 3 key disciplines: BC, crisis management, and risk management. Our mission is to make the world more resilient and be recognized as some of the best partners to build resilience for organizations. We engage in different activities. We do, of course, consulting, and then we do training, but also events and research as of this year. So we started the research channel, and we are developing and producing reports quite frequently, and I hope you will be able to take a look at the other ones that we are doing, but I'll talk about them at the end of the presentation. So moving on. This is the demographics that we got from our report, which was a series of interviews, a series of 10 in-depth interviews to either young professionals that belong to the millennials generation and Generation Z. As you can see, most of them were women, so that's interesting because it's a bit of a change of demographics compared to what we've seen up to now in the profession, where men tended to be more. But there's a shift, and that has been reflected in the recent BCI statistics that they were able to share. And also in terms of nationalities, of course, because we went through our own networks to select the interviewees, it was pretty much a bit Europe biased. So you can see the nationalities are spread throughout Europe, but there's also a few interviewees that were from the United States. So here's my first question for you, Gert. What do you think about these first numbers, about how what the gender divide is, and in terms of nationalities, what is your experience with young professionals?
Well, young professionals are all over the world, so that shouldn't be limited to specific areas. But of course, what you see is that if I look at work on business continuity management or risk management, that it's heavily generated by Europe, the US, Asia, and Australia. That's where the input comes from. So if I look at the nationalities, and of course, the number of respondents is not huge, but this needs to grow over the years. I'm not at all surprised about regarding the gender split, 8 women, 2 men. That has to do with the number of respondents and nothing else. I don't see a difference. Maybe it is 50-50, but no specific comments on the respondents or the nationalities.
Yeah, fair enough. And of course, yes, it's when it's this was a small sample, which was more about qualitative answers of the respondents. It wasn't about large samples where you can look into the nationalities and the demographics of the sample. But still, it was interesting to see that there was, maybe if we interview more people, it's going to be more 50-50. But it's interesting to see that there were a lot of young professionals that came, that were women, and differently from what we've seen in previous statistics on the industry. So that's maybe something to investigate further. Anyway, moving to the next slide. So this is about sectors. So this might be quite interesting. Most of the respondents that we interviewed, they basically had tried more than one discipline within the resilience umbrella. So some of them have started in business continuity, then moved to risk management. Some of them started in cyber, then went to BC or vice versa. Some of them have studied to become business continuity managers. They have studied emergency planning. Some hadn't. But what is interesting here that besides the different sectors that they work in, from banking to technology and luxury, but that we see already with any generation, it's interesting to see that they had already switched from different departments, different management disciplines of the resilience umbrella. So they had tried business continuity or cybersecurity or emergency planning. And I think, as we try and build resilience and spread this concept of resilience, which means collaboration between different disciplines, having a younger workforce that is already looking, breaking down the silos and moving from one discipline to the other and understanding more than one of these disciplines, I think is quite interesting. What do you think, Gert?
Well, I think this also goes back to what is your definition of resilience. I think that's still quite an open discussion, although there are definitions made by the British Standard Institution in 65000 and from a business continuity perspective in 22316. But I think it's still a quite an open field. Funny enough, if you ask people about resilience, they can come up with a sort of kind of definition, if not, from a psychological point of view or a material point of view. I always talk about a sponge being 100% resilience. It's back into shape before you let it go. And a piece of brick is 0, because whatever you do, if you break it, it will never go back to the original state. But adding to the word resilience, either business resilience or operational resilience or organizational resilience, opens a kind of a can of worms, because nobody knows exactly what you're talking about. And specifically for young professionals, this is an area where they can help and everybody in the organization understand from their perspective, the millennials and Generation Z, on how they look at it. And it should not be the elderly, I'm one of them, who should be defining what resilience is, because it is for the future. It's quite a new area. And it's good to see, of course, that there are so many different areas and sectors involved, but resilience is for everybody. And funny enough, if you look at a definition made around the business resilience job or the business resilience manager by Gianna Dettoni, is exactly the same as what we've done in the Netherlands with the Security and Continuity Institute, SECO. Talking about, okay, what is at the heart of every organization? That is, of course, risk management, because that's involved, that they are involved everywhere. But then it's crisis management, it's business continuity, it's information security and data protection. So these 5 areas are at the heart of every organization, whether you are government, in the chemical industry, production, education. It's always there. It's always there in the center of the organization. And if you're in the food industry, you've got, of course, you need to add more elements to be more resilient, like IFS and BRC and ISO standards around food safety and food fraud. But that is then an add-on based on where you are. And the same for the banking, of course, with a lot of regulation and Basel and whatever you have. But resilience is a specific sector, and again, it needs to be developed. And I'm looking at young professionals to pick this up and start a discussion. So a very good initiative to start this way, but a long way to go. And let's try and come up with one definition. Although globally spread, it's very tough to do that. We see that with business continuity as well. But yeah, I think it could be a good start to start talking about the word resilience and then the different shapes and forms that we see it.
Sorry. Hi, Gert. Are you there? Sorry, we just experienced a 10-second blackout. Gert, are you there?
Yeah, I am.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Can you just go through your last few points?
Yeah, I think the young professionals are in a great position to help us understand and come to a sort of overall definition of what resilience is, and then maybe in the specific shapes and forms of operational or organizational or business resilience, because that's still, I think, still an open end.
Yeah, I think that's very on point. And there can be the misconception that more experienced practitioners and younger ones don't feel like they want to communicate. But I think it's just that chance hasn't been there very often at this point. But I remember the way, even this collaboration, how I invited you basically to this webinar. We met at a conference and we started talking, and we were both very keen on doing this and talking to the audience about how to basically create this generational connection. And I think that's just something that hasn't been done because it hasn't been paid attention to. But there's a lot of people, a lot of practitioners from all generations that really want to do this, and this is a sign of an healthy industry trying to grow and keep up with changes and modernity. And in terms of engagement, let's look at what engagement looked like for our sample. So most of the participants were members of the BCI, which is of course one of the biggest institutes or perhaps the biggest for business continuity. And so they had the BCI as their reference. Then two of them were members of the Women in Resilience Committee. So that's an interesting angle because they were also member of this committee which they relied on to get mentoring and industry engagement. But then on the less bright side, they said that even though they used international standards very often, all the time in their job, of course, some of them followed them more to the letter than others. Some of them realized that they needed more, perhaps, specific guidelines. They said that sometimes the standards were a bit were not in depth enough for them to basically fully grasp certain concepts. So maybe that's one piece of feedback that comes from their experience, which could be useful to face as a reflection for the industry. So I think there are two takeaways, and then I wanna hear what you've got to say about this, Gert, because of course you as a member of the standards committees, you definitely have something to say about this. But I think one key takeaway is that younger professionals do use standards. And I've heard sometimes that younger professionals in BC and resilience, they just reject all the status quo. They don't like the standards. They say, no, we just do it. We don't listen to guidelines and stuff. We just do it our own way, which is, out of this world. They do use standards with criteria, with, in a smart way, but they do that. But also they had something to say about them. So what do you think both about the standards uptake and this critique? that we found in our report?
Yeah, I mean, if you have kids, you know they don't want to stick to the rules and try and find the, what's the borderline and how far can I go. So for young people to be, not really happy about standards, I understand, but you should only see it as a guideline, as a handle. If you want to start somewhere. Sometimes people tell me, I just go on the internet and go to Google and do a business impact analysis. And I said, what are you going to do then? Well, I'll look at some examples, but you only see maybe 1 or 5 or 15 out of 16.3 million or whatever it is. That doesn't make any sense. So just use a standard as a handle. And the way the ISO uses standards is, there are two different approaches, and they've chosen one. You can say, okay, this is business impact analysis, this is a risk assessment, and this is a part of strategy, and this is how you build plans. And all these elements we will put in a guideline, and that guideline's there, and it's called ISO 22313. And that guideline basically gives you a handle on how to tackle it. If you then say, well, I would like to, adhere to a standard, what are the requirements to get certified? Because, that drives culture, that drives behavior in our organization, or we need to have certification. Well, then it's the 22301 is, okay, these are the requirements. And if you stick to these and then show us how you do it, we will give you a certificate. That's basically it. Some people are allergic to certificates. Well, okay, don't do it. But it needs to stop somewhere, because if it's a guideline like ISO 22313, and in that guideline it's stated in a couple of pages how you do a business impact analysis, it is for you as a young professional and for practitioners anyway, a way of saying, okay, help me and I'll figure it out myself for the rest. That's okay. Whether you need on, for instance, an issue like or a challenge like how to build a business impact analysis, you need another piece of guidance, and it's there, 22, I think it's 317. Okay, that's even further down, more detail, and it's a whole guideline on how to do a BIA, whether that's required or not. But there you have 3 levels, and you need to just find out what is working for you. If you say I hate ISO, I don't want to do it, I don't want to look at it, just go to the BCI and you'll find the good practice guideline. And as they say, there are different roads that lead to Rome. Same here. But I would just say, use a standard for your guideline, and just follow the guideline. And if you say, well, we're not going to do this way, we're going to do it another way, we've seen it somewhere, or we found a book that talks about how to implement a business continuity management system, be my guest, go ahead and do it. It just should help you, nothing more, nothing less. Other than, of course, then you need to get certification because it's required by your largest client, or I don't know, a body that asks you to do so, or else, with your license to operate or licenses anyway. To function, like in the financial world, there's a lot of structure that is required there. In banking and insurance, it just depends on where you are, and there are areas where there's no regulation at all. But it's getting stricter and stricter, so be ready for it. And but use it the right way. That's basically how I look at it.
Fair enough. And of course, what we found in our research is that they did want to use the standards. And I see also what happens in PANTA, because we're all most of us are under 30 or around 30 years old, and we understand the standards process, and we see what I think is that as long as you have some sort of engagement with them and you understand the process, it's actually very useful to use standards and understand how they work. Unfortunately, what we saw in the research was that some of these young professionals, they didn't have access to this entire process. They didn't have a chance to have a voice, to to talk to the industry, to understand, to make people understand what their concerns were. Because oftentimes, if you have someone inside an organization who goes in the committees, is especially if it's a large organization, it's going to be someone more experienced, which makes sense. But on the other hand, you have these younger professionals that don't know how to voice their concern or voice their feedback. And something that we've started doing in PANTA is, we have our founder, Gianna, who goes to the committees and gives their feedback, but she started to share her, all the documents that she sent for review. She shares them with us, and then now we, as a collective, we can provide feedback. And she's there as well, so she knows how to guide us as well. And I think that would be a sustainable model for other organizations as well, because of course you cannot send 500 people to review the committee, to review the standards when you guys meet somewhere. But it's much easier if, as an open source kind of system, if every member of the committee then talks to their guys inside their organization, and then that way, once everyone meets, you already got feedback from a much larger crowd. What do you think about this?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's the way to do it. If I look at, I'm the chairman of the ISO MIRA committee in the Netherlands for business continuity management and crisis management. I don't have all the knowledge. Of course, I'm the best, but I don't have all the knowledge. And certainly you need to have a discussion on items like, okay, do we want to word it this way, or is this a requirement, or should it be a guideline item? But yeah, sharing it with a lot of people is good. Have a discussion on, should we go for this option or that option? Actually, what we're doing here, is this really a requirement? That's a good discussion always to have, because if you make it too strict, then it's not going to work. But on the other hand, if you give a certificate, like with quality in ISO 9001 or with environmental management and 14001, it needs to be done right. That's why you use a standard. But again, even if you don't want to use the standard and get certified, at least you can use it as a sort of a step plan to go from, especially with a high level structure that is built in, you can go from 1 to 10 step by step, and it guides you. And if something needs to change there, well, speak up, make sure that you get involved.
Yep, I agree 100%. So moving on, this is a little analysis of the priorities these guys and girls shared with us on their, of course, what their ideal workplace is. So we gave them a few choices, and then they ranked them. And these are the main key points that came up. So they, of course, cared for career and salary. I think like everyone does. But also there was a very strong feeling that the ethics and culture of an organization should be bang on point when it comes to hiring and it comes to working conditions. And they said they wouldn't be able to work for an organization. And, I agree with that 100%, for an organization whose mission and culture they don't respect, especially nowadays with a much faster marketplace where you can switch from one company to another quite quickly. They said they would never work for a company that has a mission or ethics that they don't respect. And we are seeing this around the world with employees. I think a couple of months ago I saw an article about Google employees going on strike because of some sexual assault, sexual harassment charges or issues. So I thought that was very strong. So what do you think about this all? What do organizations have to do today to make sure that they retain top talent?
Well, this is a generation issue or challenge, maybe. X, Y, Z, all these different generations as they define them. they have different things that tick their boxes. You know, I don't think we will ever experience with the current generation, let's say people from 80s onwards, born in the 80s or onwards, there will hardly be anybody who will work for the same employer for more than 40 years, as is very common right now. If I see where I, companies where I walk in and talk to people and see how their employee database is structured, people are still, having a celebration for 40 years with the company. 40, not 14. I think that's going to be a maximum, maybe 10. And the loyalty in the good way, not in the bad way. The loyalty is not with the number of years, but am I being challenged? Can I work smart? Am I involved? I think that's a big word as well. The current generation wants to be involved and maybe even make a difference. So very good to see those points coming up. And then of course ethics is, that's high. That's a high ranked topic anyway. But culture is really very important as well. If the culture is shut up and do your work, as it was in the 50s and the 60s of the last century, that is not accepted anymore. It's more about, can I develop myself? Do I get the right help? And if the career is not here, it's going to be somewhere else. So either you help me move forward or I'll be gone. And from a cultural perspective into, what we're talking about here, the current generations will want to see a vision, purpose, and want to see a bit of awareness around their subject. So, we've done at the Security and Continuity Institute here in the Netherlands a lot of research and found out that the cultural things around crisis management are around there needs to be perfect collaboration and communication, and within information security and data protection it's all about behavior and discipline, because if there is no discipline we'll have a leak or we'll have a breach. And in business continuity management, we are always fighting about ownership and commitment from top management, and ownership in the organization of BIAs and plans. So, and it's a cultural thing whether or not you get that done. And if you don't get that done, if you're in resilience, you will have to work with all three of these, plus maybe more in your specific arena. And if it's not there, if the culture is not there, and if people are not involved and you're not being mentored, you're going to walk away and find another employer and another challenge.
Yeah, 100% agree. It's a different market, but still, I think it's necessary for organizations to embrace this kind of values and in order to retain top talent. Moving forward, so this slide says starting a conversation, though we've started the conversation right from the start of this webinar, and it's been very, very interesting so far. So what I want to focus here on here is industry engagement. So if, say, I am a young professional and I want to be involved in the standards and have feedback of any kind, what do I do? Who do I get in touch with? How does it work? So if you could just explain the entire process a little bit, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, if you let's be honest, if we look at business continuity management and resilience, because basically that's where we're coming from, the industry engagement is well most mature in banking and financing. We'll see that in all reports and studies from all kinds of industries and consulting company, whether it's Gartner or it's Assurance and Clearview or it's the BCI. It's 50% or more is financial institutions, so banking and insurance and other financials. So if you want to be heavily involved in resilience and business continuity and crisis management from a serious perspective, that's the area where you need to be. That's where it's happening. But wherever you are, of course, you can get involved in, hey, I want to be part of the community that is talking about the Brazilian standards or what is happening in that arena, then you need to try and find your local ISO mirror organization. So it's the British Standard Institution in the UK, it's NEN in the Netherlands, and so spread around Europe and the world. You just need to find your local ISO organization, and if you have your local ISO document, it will state that organization, and you can get involved. There are no barriers, there are no limits. In some countries it's free, in some countries you need to pay, because they say, like in the Netherlands, they say, okay, we sell the standard, the ISO 22301, but if the community in the Netherlands says we want to get involved, okay, we will manage it, we will support it, but you need to have a budget on your own to do all the stuff that you need to do, send people to meetings abroad, or facilitate meetings. There needs to be funding, and you can get involved. So maybe you need to pay a sort of a fee to that group to be part of it, but then you have a bit of influence. And right now the ISO 22301 and 313 process of reviewing is going to be finalized. So hopefully we'll have that reviewed standard available very soon. I think end of October is the goal to have that available. But there's so much more to do. Just look at crisis management. There's never been a good standard on crisis management other than something that came from the UK, but it's not widely used. So there's now a European standard, 17091, and it's going to be picked up by ISO to make it a worldwide standard. So people in, let's say, the professional area of crisis management can get now heavily involved in helping establishing that. And again, young professionals, join. Make sure that you are part of the discussion, and maybe you'll get your line in the standard simply because you are very passionate about a certain approach of crisis management. That process is going to start shortly. And of course, there are other standards as well, supporting documents that are going to be reviewed. So, get involved. And if you want to, like with a report like this, if you stay on the sideline and you say, well, I'm not going to give any input, then don't start complaining about the fact that the outcome is not right. If you want to be involved, that's how I started as well. It costs time and energy, but at least you get involved and you can start the conversation with other specialists and have a good discussion about what should we put in a standard, and if it's under review, how should we improve this standard and make sure that the reviewed standard that is now going to be available is future proof, so that we can use that for, again, a number of years, and not after like 2 years we need to put it aside because it's outdated. You can get involved, so do.
Yeah, I agree, and I think what needs to change in terms of perception of the standards is right now they can be perceived by younger generations as a top-down imposition on how things work, on how things should work. But actually, if you look at the process, it works in a way that the industry contributes to them. They're open to everyone, and then you can provide your feedback and talk to other professionals. So it's very much a crowd effort, and then in which the industry feeds their opinions back to the standards, and then the better standards are produced. And it's done in a way that is not like one central authority imposing the standards on everyone. It's actually a very collaborative effort. I just think that the awareness needs to be stepped up a notch, perhaps. And this is basically the reason for this webinar and all the reports that we are doing on it. And I think I want to basically extend an invite to any young professionals that might be listening to this webinar. If you have any concerns or questions, you can basically ask us, and we will make sure that feedback is somehow given some voice and is heard, and we'll do our best to basically represent your voice. So I think that's one way to do it. And then of course, as as Gert suggested, find the next, the closest hub for that works with standards, that is next to you, that is near to you, and get in touch and try and get involved. And if you really want to have a voice, there's a chance for you to do that. Just need to have a look at how to do it. And so
to add to that, if I can,
yeah, sure.
On this page it says mentoring as well.
Yeah.
within that community that is talking about standards and the way forward from that perspective, you could maybe even find a great mentor who's very experienced in this area, who's available and willing to help you, and from a networking perspective as well. These are experts from all over the world, where you can find maybe a good mentor as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And mentoring was another very important value in the interviews that came up in the interviews. So yes, there's that added value of being able to find someone that can help you throughout your career. So yeah, that's absolutely a great point. That's pretty much all from me on this. Have you got any further questions, Gert?
I don't have a further question, but I just looked at the top right corner, technology.
Yeah.
And I look at the word technology from this perspective in two ways. Because if you look at technology and resilience, I think tooling could be a great enabler in an organization to get all those efforts aligned in tooling. But at the same time, we all know that technology for a resilient organization is an issue, because it is 2019, almost 2020. If I ask organizations about technology and dependency, they all say completely or 100% or wow or whatever. But shouldn't we replace that by unacceptable dependency? Because technology makes us very vulnerable. So the word technology for me is from this perspective, two different angles. One is tooling can really help me enable a good resilient organization, and at the same time technology is scaring me to death, because it just the dependency on technology is enormous, and especially of course again in the organizations that are heavily involved in resilience, and again banking and finance and IT and consultancy. Technology is good but bad at the same time.
I think it's always about striking a balance and it's always a trade-off between usability and security. And I think for example, if we look at Internet of Things devices, they are meant to they have an infinite number of ways to be applied, from farming to medicine to assessing risk, all sorts. But on the other hand, they expose an organization, people, societies to more vulnerabilities. But on the other hand, it's not like something we can stop. And I think it's good, we need to find a way to make them make technology safe. And business continuity does play a big part in this for organizations, in building sort of like the backbone of security when it comes to using technology. So yeah, there's always going to be a good and bad aspect. We just need to tip the balance towards the good side. So just a word of acknowledgement for all those that participated to our report, to our study. I want to thank them very much, and I hope that we are planning on building a series of these reports. So hopefully the next one we publish, which will be next year, will include many more participants, and anyone that wants to join, even if they want to contribute in an anonymous way. These people that took part in this survey, they gave their consent to sharing their names. But if you want to participate in an anonymous way, feel super free to do that. We won't publish, we won't connect any of your answers to your name or your company. So thanks again to agree to do the interviews. And just a few more words on our next efforts. So we will be publishing some more reports on supply chain resilience. We're launching the geopolitical risk report in London on the 5th of November at the Commercial Risk Europe event. And then there's going to be another two of these webinars based on the Rising and Resilience report. One will be on the on how to do a proper BIA, and then the third one will be a final wrap-up conversation where we'll have someone from a more experienced audience. Another one will be one of the interviewees or one of the rising workforce. And then we are going to launch a survey in November on crisis communications and social media, which will be published on the Crisis Response Journal. So there's lots to come. Next year we are ramping up the research output. So there's much more content to come, and hopefully you'll enjoy that. So these are our contacts. I want to say thanks to everyone that tuned in. Gert, thank you very much again for joining me for this presentation. Your insights have been super valuable, and I hope to see you soon again.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.